Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare.
After we broke up, he was convicted as a felon for rape of a woman while he was in college. I hope he gets the worst things life can hand him. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Women and men of Reddit. What's your Me Too, sexual assault/harassment story? How are you doing now?
Number 1.
Commenter. When I was 16, I was living at home still with my incredibly abusive parents. I was suicidal and had just switched medications. My parents were going out of town for the weekend and decided to leave me at home. I begged them to go with them or have them stay and told them that I didn't feel safe being alone, but they left anyway. Because of my depression, I had lost a lot of friends and no one wanted to come over to stay with me. I went on World of Warcraft and was venting about it to some guild mates and my good WoW friend. My WoW friend was 24 at the time and he offered to come stay with me if I was too scared to be alone. I felt weird about it, but I really couldn't be alone and I thought I could trust him, so I said yes. On the way there I really wanted to say no, don't come, but I was worried about offending him. He got to my house, I let him in and we talked and watched a movie. Things were good. Then we went to Mimi's Cafe for dinner to get our food to go. When we got back to my house he got me a soda. This is where he slipped the drug into my drink. I suddenly was extremely tired, I couldn't walk or move. He picked me up and put me in bed. I don't remember anything else. I woke up the next morning and my shirt and pants were off and I had blood in between my thighs. My nipples were also bleeding because he had bitten them. He was cuddling me and when I came to, he gave me a kiss and said, "Last night it was so fun, I love you." I was shocked and confused. I also was at a point in my life where I could not mentally handle being raped and losing a friend on top of that. My brain kind of made up a situation where this was all okay and I had wanted it. I gave him a kiss, made him breakfast and finally got him out of my house. My parents got home later that evening. My mom got a call from one of our neighbors saying that there had been a man at our house the night before. My parents asked me about it and I said it was my friend's brother. They called my friend whose parents said no one had passed. My parents lost it, and I told them the truth. My mom had my dad drop me off at a youth homeless shelter because she would not have a slut living in her house, and within 6 months I was in foster care. Person B, shit like this gets me angry. Your parents disowned you for getting raped. Damn, that is messed up. Unconditional love is what we should have for our children. Be well. Commenter. I never told them that he raped me. I said it was consensual because otherwise I'd have to admit that my last friend at my darkest moment took advantage of me and I couldn't face that reality. My parents were already super messed up, so it was easier to face their wrath than accept what had happened, if that makes sense.
Number 2.
Commenter. When I was 10 my mom started dating this guy. Shortly after, he moved in with us. He was pretty cool at first, but then he started getting really inappropriate. Things escalated and he ended up molesting my sister and I for the next 2 years. Our mom knew about it too and didn't do anything. I still feel guilty for never speaking up and telling someone. I could have put a stop to it, but I didn't. Person B, don't feel guilty. You were so young. So young. I'm so sorry you went through this, and shame on your mother for not protecting you. You feel guilty now because hindsight is always 20/20, but you didn't do anything wrong. This is 100% the fault of that awful man and your mother's unwillingness to protect you. I truly hope you and your sister are doing all right now.
Number 3.
I was a flight attendant, and had a coworker on an overnight invite to go over some contract details in his room after we had spent a few hours drinking. I believed he was gay. As soon as the door was closed he kissed me. I said no. He pushed me onto the bed until I passed out. He did not rape me, but I have no clue what else may have happened that night. I hate that I did not at least report him to the company we worked for. I never worked with him again on a flight, but I would see him every now and then at the airport crew room. This was over 10 years ago at this point.
Number 4.
When I was 22 I lived with a friend of mine. We had tried dating prior and it didn't work out, so whatever, roommates it was. We had hooked up a couple of times during this dating period we had, and after the fact I thought nothing of it. He apparently took it as him being entitled to it whenever he wanted to. One afternoon as I was about to leave the apartment to go meet a friend, he decided to act on it. I tried to fight him off, but as I was a good foot shorter than him it didn't do much good. It screwed me up for a long time, honestly. I had issues with my self-esteem and took way too many risks with sexual partners after that. I'm married now to a wonderful man who gets it, so thankfully everything turned out okay for me.
Number 5.
Commenter. I was stepping into a rickshaw in Quetta, Pakistan, when one of the native men standing around in the street stepped up behind me and tried his best to ram what felt like a couple of fingers into me through my jeans. Luckily the jeans were thick and I was wearing a sanitary napkin and his aim was off, but I ended up with a bruise on my perineum. To be honest, I had forgotten about it until recently when I was reviewing my journal from the trip. However, I still hold anger towards the boys in middle school who thought it was such fun to grab my, still growing and sensitive, breasts and occasionally my crotch, while passing me in the halls. Person B. Middle school was the beginning of sexual harassment for me. I was regularly herded into a corner, groped and threatened with rape. No one believed me.
Number 6.
I had a boyfriend back in 2013. My dad died in February of 2012 and I moved across the country to try and get my life back together. So, I didn't really have anybody here. It was after just a few months that he convinced me to move in with him. We were neighbors in the apartment complex, and it was after that point that things started to take a turn. He had to have sex, every single night. At first, if I didn't want to, he'd guilt trip me for hours, then days, until I'd give in. Then after a while, he'd start forcing me. I had insomnia and took medication for it. He'd wait for that to kick in, and then rape me. He would tell me that I just didn't know what being a relationship meant. I didn't know what love was. If I loved him, I would do this and this and this. He started restricting who I could talk to. I don't think I want to write out the rest of the story. I eventually was able to escape. My mom had to fly out from my home state, which she did at the drop of a hat, and help me pack my shit and run. I worked at a hotel and they let me stay there until I was able to find my new place. I hate that they call it intimate rape. There's nothing intimate about it. People told me to get back together with him too. That he loved me and we could work it out. F you.
Number 7.
First time, college party. I'm not sure what happened, but I kept not getting in my ride's cars. The last ditch effort in getting home was too drunk, and he passed out on the couch and said we'd go home in the morning. A different friend said I could sleep in his room and I'd be okay, as I was the only girl left. I fell asleep, remembered feeling being kissed, passed it off as dreaming and just kept sleeping. I woke up to him thrusting into me. Everything was fairly small so I didn't feel anything, and started to cry. I don't know if he finished, or what happened. I remember crying, and waking up. My brain has erased most of that night. Second time, ex-boyfriend. Besides the fact he started the night by cursing me out and berating me, I still thought he was just this drunk sweet angel. I pick him up from his night of drinking, try to make him some food to help sober him up. And he hits me. I run off, he consoles me, we go back to my apartment. In bed, sleeping, and he begins to force himself on me. Telling me I liked it, and whores like me deserve this. He had issues with people I slept with while we weren't together, despite the fact that he was the one cheating on me. I remember it hurt. I remember crying. And I remember fully consenting the next morning to a different round. Thinking, how could I be raped if this was someone I love? It took a few years, both times, to realize what had happened to me. I am at peace. I don't know what happened to the first guy, but my ex. He's a better person now, and I found it in me somewhere to forgive him for all of it. Sometime after the ex and I broke up, I dated another posse, that after we broke was convicted as a felon for rape of a woman while he was in college. I hope he gets the worst things life can hand him. I'm lucky I don't remember a lot. I don't want to remember. I'm scared it will happen again. But I know it's okay, that I'm okay, that I will move on and live. We all will.
Number 8.
Commenter. I'm a straight male, for context. About 10 years ago, while on a college break, I went to a St. Patty's Day house party with a bunch of my closest high school friends. The host's brother was there, who I didn't know well, but he seemed like a pretty typical meathead. None of us drank in high school, so we were laughing at ourselves while exchanging college drinking stories. I told one of mine, and for whatever reason the brother didn't believe me. The story was nothing special, and got really mad about it. He then challenged me to a fight, but I was like, nah, I'm good, and it seemed to de-escalate for a minute. I'm sitting down at the time and he proceeds to sit on my lap. I'm kind of stunned because it's just very strange, but he weighed much more than I did and I physically could not push him off. Meanwhile, all my friends are laughing at the situation as I struggle to free myself. I start asking and then pleading for their help, but they just watch and laugh as he then grabs hold of my crotch, sits for another minute, and finally gets up. The whole thing was incredibly bizarre, but obviously I felt very violated. I told my friends they were assholes and they waved it off. What? It's funny, not a big deal, chill out. I ended up dropping all contact with the host. Since it was her brother, I expected her help if no one else's, and years later my other high school friends still didn't understand why I hated her. Her brother came out years later, which doesn't really change anything about what happened, but I guess maybe there was something going on there behind the scenes in his head. I think about it whenever this stuff gets brought up. I'm only still in contact with a couple of these folks, just due to naturally drifting apart, but it still bothers me immensely when I see them championing people coming out with their stories and attacking the Harvey Weinsteins of the world. All I can think is you had a chance to stop an incident that took place right in front of you and you laughed.
Number 9.
Commenter. When I was a 10-year-old boy, I was selling candy bars door to door to raise money for our soccer team. My mom always told me, when you go door to door, take your big sister with you. I broke that rule once, and it was a mistake. I had gone down to the end of the block to sell some bars to my friend's mom. When I left, I saw that the house on the other side of the street had their lights on. My sister and I had tried there the day before, but no one was home. Oh, goody, I had a chance to sell an extra bar or two. I knocked on the door and a chubby blonde woman my height, I was really tall for a 10-year-old, opened the door. I explained about the bars for sale. She told me, "Oh, look how cute you are. Listen, if you come inside, I'll give you an extra special treat for your team." I was so excited that I went inside thinking it would be a big help to my team. Once inside, she started caressing my back and telling me how handsome I was. When she pulled my shirt off, I completely froze in the moment and couldn't do anything. She took this as a good sign. When she got me naked on the bed and started stimulating me, I could only think, oh, God, it's happening again, and went out of my head disassociating. I don't know how, but somehow she just knew I was vulnerable to being abused since it had already happened before. She smelled it on me and somehow just knew it. When the older boys on the street talked about getting their girlfriends naked, they said it was so awesome. What was wrong with me that it didn't sound so awesome? And it sounds insane. A woman rapist? That lures in little children. That never happens. Right? Right? Person B, what's sad is that, for many people, this kind of thing is portrayed as a fantasy for young boys, and that they should enjoy it. Kind of like whenever you see those news articles where a female teacher has an affair with a young student. All of the comments reference how lucky the kid is.
Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time. Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe, if you dare.
No. For the same reason I wouldn't buy a car without test driving it. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Guys of Reddit, would you date someone if she didn't want to have sex before marriage, and why?
Number 1.
Commenter. Went on a date with someone last year and she told me she was waiting but was down for other stuff. I had to end it because it wouldn't have worked long term and I didn't want to hurt her by doing other things and possibly feel used. It sucks and I feel bad, but I know it was the right thing. But as for me, I haven't been on another date since, so maybe I should have reconsidered. Person B, second guessing is natural. If you were having those thoughts at the start, you made the right choice. For both of you.
Number 2.
Commenter. The first thing that came to mind was this. First time sex is always weird. Even if one of you is experienced, if the other one isn't, it's not gonna be as good as it can be. Putting sex on such a high pedestal when you haven't had any will only lead you to disappointment. And you don't want that on your honeymoon just after you've gotten married. You want to have that shit down? Person B, yep, this. If I'm making the commitment to being with one single person for the rest of my life, I'd need to know we have sexual chemistry. Person C, that's really what you look for in a partner. If they're good at having sex. Commenter, it's not about being good, it's about sex drives and a manner of other things in that area. If sex was a big thing for you, would you be happy with someone that it was something they didn't like doing? Or imagine being married to someone that didn't even like the same sexual things you did. You'd never be able to explore any of that with your partner unless they were open to it, but there'd be no way of knowing that if they've never had sex.
Number 3.
It is a very important aspect of a relationship. People have different levels of desire. Some have different interests and kinks. Some people, their sexual orientations come into play. I often think this is why so many relationships and marriages fail, is because sex is often devalued because of region and social conditioning that it rears itself in many ways. Look at it this way: if partner A has a high sex drive and partner B doesn't, you are going to have the issues where one partner will always be deprived, and this will lead to resentment. Also, this is problematic as well for partner B because they will often feel obligated to satisfy their partner when they don't want to. Then of course there is the whole factoring in of kinks and interests and figuring out how much each partner is willing to entertain the others and that sort of thing. If you can't figure this out early enough, you are in for a bad time.
Number 4.
Commenter: depends on her reasons. Person B: I would be very interested in hearing a good reason. Commenter: that's how she wants to lose her virginity. She sees having sex for the first time on the honeymoon as something romantic and indispensable. She has a trauma and needs time to get used to you in that regard, gradually preparing to have sex. There could be many good reasons. Of course, whether it's a good reason or not depends, ultimately, on your perspective. Person B: how she wants to lose her virginity, and the fact that she sees having sex for the first time on the honeymoon as something romantic and indispensable are the only legitimate reasons I can think of, though it's still absurd to ask that level of commitment for something that is essentially a sexual fantasy. All the other reasons don't require marriage at all. Why would marriage help with a trauma or help her get used to me? If it's because she's afraid and not committed, then maybe we shouldn't get married in the first place. I wouldn't marry someone unless we had a years-long relationship first. Commenter: you have to keep in mind that virgins do not see sex in the same way as more experienced people. It's natural, because for them it's something they've never experienced, and they fantasize about how good it would be and how it would change them, because it must be something monumental. So I don't think it's so weird. Besides, I don't have that much focus on sex. I mean, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean I'd be happy without sex for the rest of my life. But there are more important things in a relationship. If I actually love a woman, I am not going to forget about her because I don't feel very enthusiastic about fulfilling one of her fantasies, whether it's absurd or not. As for the rest, I don't want to offend anyone who doesn't want to get married for one reason or another. I don't think it's really necessary in a relationship either, but it's a sign of commitment that you value her. It's perfectly natural for a person with a sexual trauma, or a trauma, in general, to want to get married in order to feel sure in their partner's love. If you consider that reason enough to break up with that hypothetical woman, well, I don't. Sexual traumas are strong, insidious, not easily removed. Even more so that the honeymoon is a goal and a special day that could help her push herself to lower her defenses and take another step toward overcoming her trauma. In other words, a crutch.
Number 5.
Commenter: I have sure. Didn't really see a problem with it. She was more valuable than having sex. That being said, it certainly wouldn't be my preference for my next go-round. Person B: for me, waiting until marriage isn't so much of an issue from sex POV as much as it is from beliefs. 1. Why did she wait? Commenter: very religious family. I am not. But I'm pretty laid back and cool with the lifestyle, as far as being an atheist goes. Spend enough time around her family to get used to it. Of course, when she finally got the chance to leave her parents and go off to college, shit changed a lot, as it usually does for mega religious daughters, it seems. I was a casualty of that figuring herself out process. Got dumped when she was in her senior year of HS and I was freshman in college. Sucked at the time, but she changed a lot during college, and became less my type, so maybe it was for the best.
Number 6.
Commenter: I genuinely don't think I could date someone that wanted to wait. It's probably a shitty, cliche thing to say, but sexual compatibility matters, and the lack of it could be detrimental. Person B: why would that be shitty or cliche? You're allowed to conduct your sex life in whatever way you want. Sex is amazing, there's nothing wrong with you wanting to make sure you can enjoy that facet of life.
Number 7.
Commenter: my wife and I were not virgins when we first got together, but actually waited till marriage to consummate. Worth the wait. Person B: why? Commenter: couple reasons. I was having issues with intimacy from years of abuse and rape. So I was upfront with her and she understood. She had only been with one other person. Someone she thought she was gonna marry. She/was concerned about abilities to pair bond and thought that was who she was gonna marry. After that didn't pan out, she wanted to be sure that the next person she was with would be her last. We discussed it and agreed that we wouldn't have any relations until we got married.
Number 8.
Commenter, Catholic woman here. I waited till marriage and dated a lot of guys before meeting my husband. All the guys I dated who weren't Catholic, except one, were still okay with no sex despite their initial surprise when I brought it up. You'd be surprised to see how much of a strong relationship and a great time you can have without sexual intimacy. I believe it also makes things clearer for people, i.e. you don't stay in the relationship for the wrong reasons, etc. Person B, this exactly. I'm a Christian guy, and this is why I want to wait. You can get so much more of a genuine relationship when sex isn't the main focus. Person C, that's like saying married couples shouldn't have sex, since having sex means you don't have a real relationship, and that sex is the main focus. You said you can get so much more of a genuine relationship when sex isn't the main focus. Wouldn't having sex during marriage do the same thing as before? It would distract from the core relationship. Why wouldn't that apply after you get married? How much different is the relationship the day before versus after? Commenter, sorry, I wasn't clear enough. I meant in the context of a dating relationship for someone who wishes to eventually be married. Obviously this has a lot to do with religious beliefs as well, the commitment of monogamous marriage, the sanctity of the union, the actual sacrament of marriage, God's grace and blessing on a man and woman's union are all differences in the relationship from the day before versus after, as you put it. I am not trying to paint all people with one brush but simply share my own experience and beliefs in context of the question. And I get that everyone's viewpoint is different, and that is okay too. We all do our best according to our own beliefs and capacities.
Number 9.
Commenter, I'm a Jewish raised Christian from cowboy country and I'm old fashioned, and that way she wouldn't know what I'm packing until it was too late to change her mind. I'm not a prude. I have no moral problem with sex before marriage, especially since the Bible doesn't actually forbid it specifically, but I also don't go out looking for strangers to pork. Person B, you must be reading a different Bible. What do you think you shall not commit adultery means? There are so many mentions of this directly and or indirectly in both testaments that I wonder how in the world you can possibly get confused on this issue. Whether you accept the Bible or not, that is a different issue, but the Bible is explicitly clear on this issue. Commenter, the term adultery is defined as sex between two parties in which one or both are married to different people, which is rooted in the ancient world's view of women as little more than property. The Bible never discusses what constitutes a marriage other than marital fidelity, and many examples of marriage in the Bible are essentially just get in the tent, ain't. Even the passage that most Christians love to address, Christ saying that lust is adultery, is most likely a misinterpretation, especially since you literally can in no way commit adultery if you and your target of infatuation are both unmarried. The Bible forbids, specifically, incest, bestiality, adultery, and homosexual relations between only men, at least in the yacht. In the New Testament, Paul and the other church fathers refer to sexual immorality, a term which is often interpreted as including fornication, but does not specifically refer to such. Additionally, many modern interpretations of the Bible's proscriptions against certain types of sexual conduct are disconnected from the culture of the time, such as how the modern concept of homosexuality would be completely alien to the largely bisexual Greek man. So I'm not outright defending premarital sex, but the studying and soul-searching I've done has led me to the point where my personal convictions aren't bothered by the concept of consensual sex between adults. Like I said, I don't go out sniffing for pussy, and I fully support waiting until marriage if that's what someone's convictions lead them to. But I had a particularly wild pre- and mid-adolescence before I became a Christian in my own right, and the concept of keeping myself pure before marriage is no longer applicable. Ergo, upon becoming a Christian as an independent adult, I have had to reevaluate, and this is the conclusion I've rested on. That said, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. I'm not afraid of disagreement.
Number 10.
Yes. I respect their values and morals. If I like you a lot, but can't respect you enough to wait until marriage to have sex, then I don't deserve you. Plenty of other girls that are willing to have sex before marriage, no need to try and make her change her beliefs.
Number 11.
As a guy who is that person, absolutely. And if you wind up dating someone like that, for God's sake don't push them. Accept it or leave, but don't keep coming back to it and trying to get them to reconsider. 99.999% of the time it has nothing to do with you. You could have the body of a demigod and the best personality on earth and they'd still say no. Pushing them will only make things worse and possibly lead to some very, very bad things down the line.
Number 12.
Negative. Even if I wanted to be married, and I don't, you need to know you're compatible. Like you have to jive sexually. It's an important part of a relationship. Plus, and I totally understand if virgins don't know this, but not everyone is physically compatible with everyone else. What if your dick is too big? Maybe she's not that deep. You might laugh at that idea, but that's what happened to a friend of mine. Her boyfriend just wasn't compatible with her. He was too big. Yes, that happens. Just so many reasons it's a bad idea. No. For the same reason I wouldn't buy a car without test driving it. It's a big long-term investment and I need to make sure everything works to my liking. Sexual compatibility is huge. Sex drive is huge. Some people have a high sex drive, some people have a low one. You don't want to end up in a marriage and suddenly realize that you aren't sexually compatible.
Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time. Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare. The way of the future, the way of the future. The way of. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. People with obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. What are some of your rituals and habits? Number 1.
Commenter. I always check if my door is locked. I will lock and unlock it a couple times to make sure. Another ritual is making sure both my eyes close at the same time while trying to sleep. I feel very uncomfortable if I open one eye, then close it. Then I have to open both, then close both. One last habit I have is after pouring the milk into my cereal, I take a spoonful and eat it before walking it over to the dining room and table. Person B. I do the eye thing too. I like everything to feel equal or even. Scratch one hand because of an itch. Better scratch both arms entirely so nothing is off balance. Commenter. The door thing is paranoia at best. But it doesn't impede me in the slightest since I've gotten used to my rituals.
Number 2.
Commenter. Every trash day, I make it an effort to take a warm wet towel or cloth and wipe down everywhere I've touched. After every shower, I do the same thing. I'll wipe down where I touched because I know I used to type with dirty hands before the shower or worn headphones after lawn mowing, etc. Wash hands when I touch something I think has had a dirty history to it. If it makes my hands feel grimy or something else that isn't how my hands normally feel, I wash them. Person B. Can you shake hands or hug people when you greet them? Commenter. Yes.
Number 3.
I click my toes just like when you snap your fingers. Has to be an even number of times, until it feels right. Some days when I'm feeling off I'll have blisters between them from clicking so many times. I also have a tick where I touch my nose, one side, then the other, back to the first side, over and over and over. When I was really unwell I had to constantly change the bed sheets. My kids couldn't leave the clean bathroom after bath time until their rooms were clean enough for them and their sheets were fresh. Or I'd wake everyone in the house up to vacuum the bedrooms and change the sheets.
Number 4.
Commenter. As a teenager who struggles with it, I've learned to just suffer the feeling of burning alive or full body muscle tension when I don't fulfill one of my habits or tics. It's slowly getting less intense. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without my mother, who has taken 40 years to do what I've done in 17, thanks to her, to at least have self-control. Person B. It does get less intense. It's very much like cigarette cravings when you quit smoking. Unfortunately, there are still always certain times when it creeps up from the back of your mind. Commenter. Whenever I find myself giving into the habits and tics I tend to use loud music to help. Metal helps best, but a second best is punk. Rap makes it a hell of a lot worse, but I can listen to it when I'm not having issues.
Number 5.
Commenter. I have to focus on locking the doors every night. Even if I pay attention, by the time I get to the last door I question whether the first one is locked and have to do it all over again. Towels have to be folded a specific way and stacked in order. I have to check the rooms indoors before I leave and make sure they are closed or opened. Usually have to do it a few times. I will drive back home if I keep questioning it. When running errands, everything has to be accomplished on the same day. It may take 1 hour or 8. When I get home, everything needs to be properly put away regardless of how tired I am. Thankfully, things have been regulated with proper meds. I still have to do things a certain way, but I'm learning to relax. OCD is an accounting thing, it's the need for things to be done a certain way, and straying from the routine makes you very anxious. Panic attacks because the brown towel is in the stack of tanks is not fun. Person B. Have you ever left home and driven back to make sure the doors were locked or if the stove was off? Commenter, yes. Never been much of a stove person, but I did go through a stage where I thought I hit the knob and turned the gas on. For me, it all revolved around worry and setting ridiculous task lists. I would make a huge to-do list every day and then punish myself if I didn't complete everything. I wasn't allowed to relax unless I earned it. It took 2 years of therapy to tone down the list making and a self-punishment.
Number 6.
When my right foot hits the floor, I have to snap with my right hand. When my left foot hits the floor, I have to snap with my left. Does anyone remember the Cup song? From Pitch Perfect? Well, for about an hour a day I will do it with my eyes, blinking and winking and moving them around in order to get it perfectly right. When I get home from school, I have to step through the door right foot first, and then continue walking left-right until I've made it to the living room. Then, I do a swift turn and repeat it all the way back to the door. If it isn't perfect, I have failed and must try again. I have crazy anxiety that my car is going to crash. To prevent the crash from happening, I must tap the ceiling of the car 5 times, count to 30, stomp on the floor 10 times, and open and close the window twice. Then I may turn the car on. Hope I gave you some insight into obsessive-compulsive disorder.
Number 7.
Commenter, where to begin? Series of repetitions apply to all of my OCD. I have already looked at this page 3 times. I reopened my app 5 times, and I have scrolled to the bottom and back up 7 times. The 3-5-7 pattern is somehow comforting. Light switches are a terrible nemesis. They have been for endless years. I can't pass a light switch which requires turning on or turning off without switching it 3, 7, or 13 times. I have no idea why I like these 3 numbers, but somehow having specific odd numbers gives me a sense of security and that there's always an extra should one be lost, corrupted, or somehow ineligible. I have broken many light switches. I absolutely must step on all sidewalk cracks. It diversifies my risk of falling if the sidewalk I am 50% standing on should plummet to hell beneath my feet. But the worst is breathing. Maybe 15 or so years ago, I developed a bizarre OCD twist in that I felt compelled to hold my breath until I could exhale it while looking at something or doing something in an OCD-compliant way. For example, I have to look at all 4 corners of the bed before I can exhale before I get into bed at night. Or all 4 sides of my car before I can get in it. It is as if the very act of exhaling breath before I can complete a numerical sequence will cause my mind discomfort. As I am typing this, I hold my breath until the period of each sentence is complete. From the way I pick up my fork at dinner to the number of times I stack a paper before stapling it, 7 times with an overlap of 3, very precise, these bizarre OCD sequences permeate literally everything I do and are sometimes very time-consuming. I have not taken any action in years and years that was free of it. And yet it somehow does not really bother me. About 10 years ago, I gave up struggling against it and now just regulate everything I do according to an inexplicable sequential protocol. Everything carries out according to an individual numerical protocol. Each action I take or task I perform has a number of numbers associated with it that sets my mind at ease. It adds time onto each day. How I have grown to hate opening up my sock drawer, but it's just a strange way of life. I have other more common OCD tics, such as a generalized phobia of germs and a burning need to wash my hands after coming in contact with something I have mentally flagged as unsanitary or unclean, such as a doorknob or a sick person. But the sequencing really gets me and causes much more stress and functional delay than anything else. At one point years ago I was counting up to 37 on everything. Fortunately, this usually doesn't prevent me from living a relatively functional life, and because it's all internal, few people know what's going on. For example, if I take a moment too long to open a can, someone may simply assume I am reading the label or thinking about a recipe. Professionally, I control and utilize my OCD at work, where it enables me to do some very precise tax work with great accuracy. And because I have given over to my OCD fully, I actually experience no stress from the compulsions, and I have no anxiety over anything else in my life, which means that I am a low-stress individual. But full OCD compliance requires me to be at inherently high tension, which is different from anxiety, beneath the surface at all times. I truly do not know what the future holds, But each day, I pray that I will not have to turn off any more light switches than I absolutely have to. Person B. Very interesting, because my habits are almost opposite from yours. My pattern is 4-6-8, everything has to be in 4s and 8s, and I absolutely cannot step on cracks or I get an uncomfortable, itchy feeling in my feet. Commenter. It truly is a fascinating affliction. I know what you mean about the itchy feet. For me, it's a burning sensation when I have touched something dirty or germy, which continues until I wash my hands. It is very interesting how each of us has typical yet entirely unique symptoms. Person C. Can I ask you about medication? Have you ever been treated? I am afraid of losing that edge for the same reason you seem to be. The advantage that it provides you in your tax business is helpful. In other aspects, it ruins things for me. Commenter. I have never been formally diagnosed or treated in any way, so I have no idea what would happen. My immune system has major allergies and issues with a lot of prescriptions and vaccines, so I have been instructed by a specialist only to take medication absolutely essential to my survival. Crazy ironic, I know, haha.
Number 8.
My biggest one probably is that I knock on door frames twice when I enter a room. I also have to pray in a bathroom stall before I board an airplane. I'm not religious at all, fui you. Otherwise, it just depends. I'll get incredibly anxious if things aren't done a certain way, and have to redo them again and again, mostly cleanliness stuff, hand washing, washing clothes, dishes, etc.
Number 9.
It used to be a lot worse when I was younger, but I've learned to control it better with being less anxious. The one I don't do at all anymore is that I used to hawk a loogie every time I would see something that grossed me out. In my mind it was like I was purifying my thoughts or something by getting out all the bad stuff. I grew up in a smoking household and hated it, and so everyone I would see a cigarette I would hawk a loogie and spit it down the bathroom sink. It sounds weird, I know, but it made sense in my 5-year-old kind. The other one that I still sometimes do but not nearly as often is get things in 4s, but it also has to be symmetrical. So if I bump my left finger the wrong way I have to bump my right finger twice, then my left finger again. This closes up the problem and puts it at 4. If it got really bad I would have to close up in a bigger way. So it would be like bumping with my left, then right twice, then left, then repeating that but starting with my right, then left twice, then right, then do that again, and follow up at starting with my left, right twice, then left to close the full loop. Not sure if I explained that right, but it's one of those things that makes sense in your heart but not when you explain it, kinda like dreams.
Number 10.
I touch doorknobs the same way each time I pass them. If I mess up, I need to start. If I'm particularly stressed I'll check locks several times. I'll walk into the kitchen just to make sure all cupboards, drawers, etc. are closed. Clothing must be folded in a certain way. Numbers that are multiples of 5 are good numbers. Odd numbers are generally bad. Everything in my room has a very specific place, and if that were to change when I wasn't present, I would notice almost immediately and fix it. For instance, all of my medications sit in a box arranged in a certain order. Each one is in a specific place and each one has a colored dot on top so I know which is which. I can glance at it and tell if they're in the right spot. Things can't be hanging off tables. I'm always afraid they'll fall off. After I say something I have a tendency to repeat the last word over and over again under my breath. This can go on for an hour or longer. I'm sure there are more. These are just the ones I can remember right now.
Number 11.
I type in my head. It's been pretty constant for the last 10 years or so, and I've pretty much given up on stopping at this point. It's like a virtual keyboard in my head and words that I see and hear get typed out. I try to balance the number of letters that would be typed by the left and right hand, so sometimes it can be distracting, but for the most part, it's like a background process in my brain. I had a terrible compulsion when I was a teenager though that messed me up a little. My mom commuted, and I was convinced that if the last words I spoke to her when she left in the morning weren't "I love you," then she was going to get in a car crash and die. Doesn't seem too terrible until you miss a morning and have a complete mental breakdown. It was before I had a cell phone too, so I had no immediate way of contacting her. It was not a pleasant experience.
Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time. Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe, if you dare.
My husband began surreptitiously going to strip clubs. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit.
Husbands and wives that got divorced after 20 years of marriage. What made you decide to change your mind after all that time? Number 1. I will be one of the few that speaks from experience. I have been married 20 years, and we are on the edge. The answer is that life changes you. When you start out, the relationship is its own thing, it is cultivated and grows. Then over the years add some children and full-time jobs, and there is less time to cultivate, or none. You end up becoming life partners to run the household, and wonder why you are even together. Since there are no good times, all that is left are arguments and bad times. This is all normal, and on top of that you are both going through the personal struggles of living. To be honest, staying married is tougher than most people think in an age without divorce social stigma. The kids do keep you together, hoping somehow you can rekindle something that once existed. Number 2. My mom filed for divorce after 27 years with my dad. Us kids were out of the house, and I think she had a midlife crisis, thinking that if she decided to do nothing, then that's how she'd die, in that house, doing nothing but things that make the days go by faster. I do believe an old high school flame helped her make the decision as well. At first I was hurt, but as I get older now I completely get why. My dad prefers routine over excitement and had a habit of saving us poor when we didn't need to. At first it was a financial requirement, then it became an obsession. My mom wanted to travel and experience new things in her later years. She deserves that, and my dad deserves to live how he wants to too. Today I see two happier people, and that makes me happy. Number 3. I worked at a law firm that only practiced family law, divorces, child custody, wills and estates, etc. At one time we had like 8 clients getting divorced after 20 plus years of marriage, and they were all high-ranking military men whose wives came out of the closet after all their kids had grown up, and moved out of the house, and the guys were getting ready to retire. I thought it was so weird, but I guess for whatever reason the women thought that their duties to their husbands and families were coming to an end and they wanted to live for themselves. I guess I know why they couldn't come out 30 years ago. It was a different time, but I was curious why they were all attracted to military guys. I assume maybe cause it meant their husbands would be away for years at a time during their service. Number 4. My parents split up after nearly 30 years. My dad was an asshole my entire life, so when they finally divorced when I was 18, there was no surprise. He'd been cheating for years, and I think he was the one who finally asked for it. I think my mom stayed because she couldn't afford to start over. She spent her life putting my dad through school and wasn't educated herself. She had no family or anyone who could help her either. There were definitely some confidence issues on her part too. Number 5. My husband began surreptitiously going to strip clubs. He stole about $200 a week from various accounts and a business I owned to fund these activities. He lost his job because he went there so often at lunch and would just stay. We had young kids, and so I stayed after he got some therapy. He was never honest with the therapist. About a year ago I learned he was doing it again. Plus texting strippers. My youngest kid graduates high school this year. I've done what's best for everyone else for 20 years now. This September was 21 years. I don't anticipate having a 22nd anniversary. It's really scary to think of being alone. I don't hate him. I feel sorry for him. I know he will feel very sad and lonely when I'm gone. But being near him feels like having my soul ripped from my body every day. Number 6. Therapy changed my mind. After more than a decade of being miserable, I finally got help. When I was able to really talk about my marriage was when I realized that I needed to get the F out. At the end of the day, I stayed in a shitty marriage because the thought of being alone scared me. Through therapy I was clued into how many wonderfully supportive friends and family members I had if I just reached out to them. I wasn't going to be in a relationship anymore, but I wasn't alone either. Number 7. Commenter. Not myself, but my parents. They were married for 22 years when they separated, 24 years by the time the divorce was final. From the perspective of a child in the situation, there was no way that they were happy people together. There was hardly ever a quiet moment in the house because of my father's temper, but my mother knew how to serve it back too. However, the final straw was more of a chain of events. My father had a very rigid view of the family. Man works, woman stays home, cares for the home and children. When I was in high school, my father got injured at work and needed surgery. He worked a physically demanding job, and would be out for 6 months. My mother, Knowing that we were already falling behind on vehicle and house payments, decided to find part-time employment. She worked while the kids were in school. It was still important to her to see her kids get on the bus and be there when they got home. My father immediately believed that she was cheating on him. He installed a tracker and tape recorder in her car. He showed up at her workplace and caused a scene multiple times. He questioned her coworkers. He spent most of his time at the house drinking. This was not an equal partnership, and it really never was. You should have seen how hurt he acted when my mom finally asked for a divorce. But he rebounded real quick. All he had to do was tell some woman on Plenty of Fish's sob story, and he moved right into her house. He spent a couple of years treating her and her children horribly before she kicked him out. Only took him a couple of weeks in a hotel to find another woman to let him move in. Person B. Sounds like my grandpa, except when he started drinking and accusing grandma of cheating, he beat the shit out of her. It all backfired one day though. Grandpa had 7 sons, all really good wrestlers and boxers, because grandpa thought men should know how to fight. One day they ganged up on grandpa, they were 8 to 17, beat the shit out of him, tied him up to a tree and left him outside all night. Then they told him they'd kill him if he ever drank or hit grandma again. It's crazy to me because I only ever got to meet the nice version of my grandpa who didn't drink. Number 8. Parents divorced after 25 years when my mom had what we thought at the time was a midlife crisis. She told my dad by draining $3,000 from the joint checking account to fund her divorce lawyer. 6 years later they were officially divorced since she blew through that money on different lawyers that kept firing her as a client. We later ruled out midlife crisis when her behavior started to become more odd, erratic, and paranoid. She was in her early 50s when this behavior started. Now we, myself and my sister-in-law with psychology experience, think she is late onset bipolar, and I say think since we can't get her officially diagnosed since she believes nothing is wrong with her. She lives in NY and it is super hard to commit someone there unless they are a danger to themselves or other people. She's not dangerous, just can't hold down a job and lives in her car due to her own insubordinate sporadic paranoid behavior but blames everyone else. No, she's not a narcissist, just mentally ill since she was never like this when we were growing up. She was very selfless and caring when she was younger. Number 9. My parents got divorced after 22 years of marriage. They were never in love and didn't even like each other. They had me and then my sister a few years later and wanted to stay together for the kids. 12 years after I was born they had my brother and that kept the cycle going. I wish I could say they are happy now, but they still like to cause trouble for each other. We're due with our first child soon and then they're gonna have to figure out how to be grandparents together. Thankfully I'm 1,500 miles from them so it won't be a headache often. Number 10. My parents divorced when I was a year old, due to my dad's alcoholism, and then remarried when I was 3 and he was sober. While I was 16, 24 years combined years married at this point, they were filing for divorce again but were informed by their lawyer that in Iowa you cannot marry the same person 3 times. So they just separated for about a year and then got back together. They just needed a break I guess, but are stupid for each other and couldn't bear the thought of not being able to try again. My dad is still sober with no relapses and they'll have their 50th anniversary next March. They like each other much better now than they ever did as young people. Number 11. There's a guy in my town that everyone knows about because he owns this huge-ass mansion in a middle-class neighborhood. Apparently he was married to a woman for a long time but she left him calling him a loser because his business hadn't taken off yet. After she left him his business finally took off, he sells medical equipment to hospitals, and he became FU levels of rich in a few years. The reason he built the mansion in that neighborhood was because that is where she lives so she has to drive by the mansion on her way to work every day. Number 12. We were together for 20 years, married for 15. We started as high school sweethearts, but we eventually realized that we weren't the same people we were when we fell in love. We also realized that that wasn't going to change. We decided that the best way for everyone to be happy for the rest of our lives was to end it on peaceful terms before we were both 70 and resentful of each other for trapping each other in an unhappy marriage for 40 plus years. Number 13. Started dating at 17, got married way too young. By our 30s we were completely different people. At 40 I asked myself, can I do this for the rest of my life? And realized the answer was no. We both have new lives now and eventually each found new partners and are much happier. I think the second time around, especially when you're older, you know exactly what you want and what you are or aren't willing to put up with.
Number 14.
23 years. I had lied to her several times over the years, and she always forgave me. The last time I lied to her about accruing a severe amount of debt due to a gambling addiction. I think she might have forgiven the lie, but she couldn't forgive the addiction and the chance I'd start gambling again. I started attending Gamblers Anonymous after I told her, but it was too little too late for her. On the plus side, I haven't gambled in almost 3 years.
Number 15.
My parents divorced after like 18 years due to gambling. He was a total dickhead when he was losing and I was a teenager. I was probably grounded for a year of my life or more. He hasn't gambled in 10 years now and is a freaking treat to be around. He still occasionally apologizes for being such an asshole.
Number 16.
Had to watch my parents go through the paperwork to get divorced after my dad had a massive stroke and was forced to retire. It was the only way for them to keep the money from his pension and maintain his health insurance coverage. My parents got a divorce of convenience so Pops could make the mortgage payments and get his insulin. Thankfully my parents' insurance agent is a close friend, and found every possible form and loophole so they could stay in the house together. It took almost 2 years to get everything settled. I'll never forget my dad's statement after it was all done. The church still says we're married, and that's what matters to us. At least now, your mother can still get her hearing aids and pay the mortgage if something happens to me. I was so disgusted with it all. I never forgave my dad's union for it, and we now make sure someone from our family shows up to their annual open meeting when they discuss the health insurance plan to shame them in explicit detail with how the board f's over the roughnecks.
Number 17.
My husband's parents did this. He said he knew his parents weren't happy for a long time. Said they went to family therapy together, but ultimately once my husband went to the army, he was the younger of two, they divorced and both later married other people. These two could not get along for anything, they hated each other. At our wedding, we had to take separate family pictures with the dad and new wife and then with the mom and my sister-in-law. It was insane. Cut to about 2 years after our wedding and I get a phone call from father-in-law's wife of 10 years, she's in hysterics. She had caught him in bed with my mother-in-law. My husband would not believe it until he talked to his father. That was over 10 years ago. My in-laws both divorced their partners and have been together ever since. My mother-in-law has all their old family pictures on display everywhere and acts like they never divorced and have been together for over 4 decades, ha ha ha. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.
Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe, if you dare.
I just wrote a $17,000 check to pay off my outstanding student loans earlier this year. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. People who believe in forgiving student loans. What should happen to those who paid their way through college?
Number 1.
Commenter. I don't think anyone with a reasonable understanding of the banking business, contracts and personal responsibility would support forgiving all student loan debt. Person B. You seem to be forgetting that most people don't seem to have a reasonable understanding of the banking business, contracts and personal responsibility. Commenter. I was referring to the fact that anyone who might be in a position to change the status quo probably does, and thus it won't happen. Person B. You're probably right, but the thing that scares me is that there are plenty of politicians out there. The guys who might be in a position to change the status quo, who are more worried about pleasing the majority than actually protecting the economy. When the masses start yelling, they start listening. I'm not saying this will necessarily happen, and I'm not saying that doing what your constituents want is necessarily a bad thing. That's what a representative democracy is all about. It just worries me. Person C. My wife works for a bank as one of those people you call to talk about like fees on your account or something. She says some of the people are freaking morons. She walked this girl through math and came up with the same conclusion, that she basically didn't compensate for the amount of money she used, and she was still like, where's my money? When are you guys going to deposit it? Well ma'am, it is right here, and this is what you have done since, but why isn't it showing up? My wife comes home with one of those I don't want to live on this planet anymore stories each day.
Number 2.
Commenter.
I honestly have not seen tons of posts calling for forgiving all student loan debt. Most people are just asking for some reform in the system. I don't have any links offhand, but I think it's pretty obvious that the student loan system is pretty corrupt and has shielded itself from a lot of regulation. Couple that with how much tuition has gone up in like the last 10 years and you have a major problem. Yes, people who work hard or give their dreams so they don't go into debt should be praised, and those that recklessly take out loans should not be rewarded. I think I am somewhere in the middle. I went to law school and racked up over $200,000 in debt. There is no such thing as going to a cheap law school because, other than some UCs and a few state schools, most charge close to $40,000 a year. I worked during school, but most of the jobs were for free. Unlike undergrad, I knew very few people who worked significant hours at a paying job while doing well in law school. Bottom line is that even if the circumstances were different, I would have come out of school with massive loans. I don't think it is an inherent right to rack up debt pursuing a career, so my loans shouldn't be forgiven. At the same time, it shouldn't cost $120,000 plus to get my degree, and I don't think my loans shouldn't be racking up 8% interest a year. As far as discharging student loans in bankruptcy, you can thank the lobbying power of their industry for that. It doesn't make sense to me to say you signed up for the loans, you have to take responsibility, but then allow people who rack up massive debt in other areas, credit cards, cars, houses, etc., to discharge all/almost all of that debt. Person B, indeed. I would never in a million years suggest that student debt loans should be forgiven at the drop of a hat, but it would be nice it were treated like other forms of debt. It almost takes an act of Congress to get an individual debt forgiven. Not even bankruptcy can protect you. No other debt gets so much special fuck you treatment as student debt.
Number 3.
Commenter. I'm one of those kids that worked 30 to 40 hours a week to put myself through school. It was hard, but made me a stronger person, and now that I only work full time, it's like every day is a half day. I'd be fine with tax credits but not with forgiving the loans. Person B. I agree, I'm going through school right now. I work 40 hours a week and go to school full time. I am in no debt for college at all. I would hate if everyone just got their loans forgiven because hell, I have been able to pay every semester. Why can't they get a job and go to school? It takes a little longer, but oh well, I feel a lot better about myself because of it. Person C. I'm paying off my student loans now, and to be honest, I'd feel guilty as hell if they forgave them. It's unfair to you, and frankly it's not what I signed up for either. I'm proud of working for what I have, and by the same token, not expecting anything I haven't earned. I took that money with the full expectation of paying every red cent back, in order to have the luxury of going to school and not having to worry about a full-time job on top of it. A tax credit for all recent graduates for a certain amount of time, maybe based on the time it takes for the average graduate to pay off their loans, sounds like it'd be the most fair. Help us out and allow the ones who've already worked probably twice as hard to reap the most benefit.
Number 4. Commenter. Student loan debt used to be dischargeable in bankruptcy. The main limitation was that you needed to be at least 7 years out of school. That is still the rule, I believe, in Canada. That seems to be a good solution, but there are a lot of other solutions. Obviously, mass forgiveness of debt without consequence makes bad policy. But making student loans permanently inescapable regardless of circumstance is also bad policy. There are plenty of ways to use the bankruptcy code to allow a discharge. The obligors should be forced to prove that they made efforts to pay the loans, are suffering a true hardship, or have been out of school for some period of time. They should suffer the credit consequences of bankruptcy, and have their situation reviewed individually. Person B. It seems somewhat ironic that student loans of all things are non-dischargeable. It's possible to have loans for cars, homes, and whatever you buy on a credit card discharged if you're in harsh enough of a circumstance, sometimes preventable, sometimes not. Of course, many of these people are judged for living beyond their means and buying more homes/cars/clothes/gadgets than they could afford. Our society doesn't have the same attitude towards education. People are told that getting a college degree is a decision where they can't go wrong. But if they end up in a bad financial situation because of their student loans, there is absolutely no way out, short of a limited number of extenuating circumstances. I think schools that take student loan funds need to be held more accountable. The worst offenders are for-profit colleges that aggressively sell low-quality and insanely overpriced education to people who don't know any better. Why not refuse to give student loans to new students in schools/programs that graduate people who end up defaulting on their loans? That way schools would need to either improve their programs to where they are actually worth something, or stop offering them altogether.
Number 5. Commenter. I have a huge amount of student loans, but I don't want to be bailed out. Well, I do, but I know it would be a horrible policy. What I would like is some system where student debt is managed better. Like in Australia, you only pay if you have a job that pays a certain amount and only for a certain time. I think I heard 25 years, then it is forgiven. Or maybe a work program that I can work for a couple of years for a relatively low-paying job related to my skill that pays off my loans. Or as others have said, tax credits. I don't expect my debt to just go away, but the government is doing nothing to curb the crazy rise in costs of education. The least they could do is organize a way to help recent grads. I would love to have more than $125 for food a month. Thank God my parents are supportive and help me out a bit yet. Note, I got a job right out of college that pays $43K a year, and I suspect within a couple of years I will have things under control, but this first year or two is going to be cutting it close, and I will probably build up some credit card debt in a month, thus the parents helping. Food is good. Person B. Reduce the interest rate. How is this not discussed more? I'll pay more than $200,000 in interest before my loans are paid off in 10 years because my rates are 8.5% and 6.8% under the federally guaranteed loan programs. The government could reduce the burden on recent graduates significantly by offering refinancing at a lower rate to borrowers who actually pay back the loans. There is no reason a non-dischargeable debt should be paired with a 6% plus rate in this economy. Person C. A program like that is already available, called income-based repayment. It's only for federal loans though. Not a lot of people seem to know about it. Commenter. Yeah, I didn't qualify for a lot of federal loans. In fact, the federal loans I have are pretty reasonable as far as interest rate and payment. It's the private loans that cause most of the stress. After reconsolidating the payments will be within my budget, barely. A few have programs that help out, but there is no move by the government to encourage lending companies to make school affordable to recent grads. Thank God I picked a useful major or I'd be screwed. Number 6. The people calling to forgive student loans just want their own loans forgiven. I have been working since I was 17 to pay for college. There are a lot of people like me. It can be done, it just requires determination. Number 7. Here in New Zealand, student loans are managed by a government department. They don't accrue interest and you're not obligated to even start paying it back until you earn over $20,000 a year. This gets people through their education and into the workforce without the pressure of debt, but they still end up paying for their education when they have the means to do so. It was an experimental system that immediately proved to be a net gain to both the economy and the well-being of students and graduates. Number 8. I would just like to know why costs are rising so quickly. I went to a great school in the 90s and came out with about 12G, pre-interest, with a 5% interest rate, in debt and paid a little more than $100 a month for 10 years to kick it. Why are people paying 20% interest when banks are paying 5% interest to savings accounts? I guess the risk is high with a bunch of unemployed young people is pretty high, but at what point does jacking the rate on your payers increase your own risk? Number 9. Forgive no student loan debt. Maybe let people repay it at a lower interest rate, but no. You used the money, you signed an agreement to repay it. Either pay your damn debt, or go file bankruptcy and deal with that headache. I just wrote a $17,000 check to pay off my outstanding student loans earlier this year.
Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time. Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare. Loudest drunk, F it, we're never gonna come back to this shithole. Me, it's exactly the point. Please leave. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Waiters/servers of Reddit. What is the best clapback you've delivered to a rude customer? Number 1. Commenter. Live in a small town, and I work in a fish and chip shop, one of 2 in the town. We were a tourism town, and one of the main attractions was the award-winning fish and chips, top 5 in the county while I was there. People in the town believed we were in massive competition with the other shop. We weren't. We had 25 plus staff, they had around 7 to 8, and we were serving thousands more customers than them per week or even per day in summer. So, on the rare occasion whenever a customer got angry, they would simply exclaim, "Well, I'm going to insert supposed competitor's name here instead, and I won't be back." Like it was a big deal and would really hurt our feelings/business. We would simply tell them that we don't want them back, and they should enjoy the food from the other shop. We owned both shops. Person B, okay, that last line made it pretty awesome. Person C, I heard that shit so much, but when I was in call centers and not restaurants. Well, maybe I'll just buy this item you don't have from Macy's. Certainly. Would you like me to call them for you and transfer you over? If they have the thing and we don't have the thing, then buy them thing from them you evacuated bent. Number 2. Commenter, not me, but my manager. Women come in every Sunday. And complain every Sunday. This past time, she said, I won't be coming back. And he goes, alright, I'll see you next week. Person B, so did she ever come back? Commenter, yes, the very next week. And of course complained about our wait time, even though she knows damn well Sundays are our busiest days. The church crowd is easily one of the most entitled groups of people, generally speaking, and she's a part of it. Every Sunday. Number 3. Commenter, I was a witness to a silent owning that I get giddy thinking of. Buddy of mine is serving a table and the kid is around 8 to 10. Gives her an adult glass for her apple juice. Dad pipes up and says he doesn't want her having all that sugar, so he needed to take it away and come back with a kid-sized one. My friend replied that the glasses are the same size, the adult size just looks bigger because they have thick bottoms. The dad responds that the adult glass is clearly bigger, and like I said, I don't want her to have all that sugar. My buddy is an asshole. He gives a super deliberate exaggerated nod, says nothing and marches to our little service alley behind the bar and re-emerges with a kid's cup, sets it down beside the glass, picks up the glass and pours the adult glass, lifting it progressively higher until the last drops he drops from like a foot over the glass, and darts the F off to the kitchen without even looking at the guy like didn't even exist. I died. Person B, that's such a great way to tell the guy to F off. Person C, own guy did a similar thing, but I worked in a shoe store. So our shoe store carried extended children-sized shoes for kids with really large feet. The kid's 3 is the same as a woman's 5, 4 is the same as a 6, etc. There would be moms all the time that wouldn't believe me that the sizes are the same until I showed them the shoes, showed the different sizes, and then helped up the shoes sole to sole. Number 4. Commenter, way back in the day when I worked in food service, we had a customer who got a salad, and when she was finished placed one of her hairs in the bowl in order to get it refunded, and got the complimentary I'm sorry free bakery item. She did this every day. Finally the DM sat down at her table and told her this was her last day eating in the cafe, they would refuse her refund today and refuse her service in the future. She started to say something about the customer always being right, and he just put up a hand to cut her off and said, you cause us to lose money every day. You're absolutely not our customer, you are a liability, and you're no longer welcome here. It took embarrassingly long to get there. I worked in training support and the issue came to light during an associate level customer service class. They had been going with it for at least a few weeks. I'm not sure if the managers all knew what was going on, but I called their GM and DM after class and it was taken care of between the two of them by the end of that week. Person B, you are a liability, yes. I love it. Person C, from every sense she's a liability. If an inspector happens to be in there, they get a strike or worse. If other customers come in right as she does it, it could cost them additional revenue. There are other situations where this is a major issue, more than just giving her a free meal. In fact, from the business point of view, assuming they get lots of business, her one free meal a day is insignificant compared to everything else that it could potentially cost them. Number 5. My brother was a waiter and was working with a really difficult woman. She ordered the salmon and asked when it got to her table if it was farm raised. She got mad at him because he didn't mention that the salmon was farm raised when she was ordering, even though it clearly states that it is farm raised on the menu. She ordered the chicken to replace the salmon and my brother said, I have to warn you, it's farm raised. Number 6. Commenter, bunch of drunks making a mess, wasting our time and harassing other tables. Me, the manager, has decided all of you need to leave. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone and your behavior warrants it. Loudest drunk, F it, we're never gonna come back to this shithole. Me, it's exactly the point. Please leave. Person B, yep, this is unfortunately common at the brewery I work at. Once we had a whole high school reunion, 100-ish people show up unannounced and proceed to be incredibly rude / get too drunk / refuse to pay. One guy who got cut off said that he was the head of the alumni committee, sure bud, and said that if he doesn't get served he will never invite people to the brewery ever again.
We have never been more happy to not serve a customer.
Number 7.
Working for a moving company, customers always get mad when we don't have the equipment available for them when they show up last minute with no reservation. Well, I'll just go to competitor's name. Would always reply with exact directions. Great, they are a block north, on the right side. You can't miss me. Never failed to get a disgusted scoff, but we would always see them again in an hour or so to set up a reservation when competitors didn't have any equipment either.
Number 8.
Had a customer harassing me over a product he bought and wanted to return. No receipt, over the return date, claimed he paid for it in cash. I told him that the return policy was within 30 days and he had to have a receipt. Him, you're just paid to say that. Me, as a matter of fact, I am paid to say that. That's how jobs work. Never saw his scamming ass again.
Number 9.
Commenter. An older woman at my table asked me what my mother must think about my tattoos and I said, well, my father doesn't mind. She didn't take the hint, I guess it wasn't a very good hint, and asked, well, what about your mother? To which I replied, she's dead. She doesn't do a lot of thinking. Did she stop there? No. She said, did she die of shame? I just said no, breast cancer, and dropped the check. They weren't done eating but her guests looked like they wanted to leave. Person B, yikes. Imagining being her, after you said that, makes me want to collapse into myself and pop out of existence. Person C, sadly I doubt someone who would further say did she die of shame has the self-awareness to then feel shame herself for how horrible of a question that was. She completely lacked the ability to read the situation and STFU when told ops mom was dead.
Number 10.
Commenter. My manager gave a customer credit for an order then blocked her from delivery so she never was able to use it. Person B. Ha ha, awesome. I worked at an athletic wear store one time and someone tried to return 2 jackets I just knew hadn't sold. They were Carmelo Anthony Jordan jackets still at full price. I asked the lady and her son where they came from and said the teen's father bought them at this store. I asked her to call him and you could see she looked nervous. She was shaking with her phone and I don't know if she made the call or not. So I verified in inventory that the jackets should have still been in store and made sure they weren't on the rack while I had another manager watch them and hold the merch. She said the dad said they came from here and I was like, cool, I just have to put a store number in when there's no receipt. Then I issued them a merchandise credit for something near $200 and told them I'd be there when they decided to find something he liked more. Then I used the merch credit number to buy the jackets back to reset my inventory to one of each. Person C to person B. It's probably because I need sleep, but I don't understand quite what you did to the jackets. Please explain like I'm an idiot. Cause maybe I am. Person B. Basically they processed the return onto a store gift card. Then when the customer left the store the employee used the gift card number to purchase the jackets again. Now the gift card is empty so when the customer, thief, tries to use it won't work. To the store it is a wash. Thief stole jacket, minus $200 inventory, thief returns jacket for credit, plus $200 inventory, minus $200 money, store uses that credit to pay for jacket, plus $200 money, minus $0 inventory, equals no loss to store, they have the jacket back and the money back.
Number 11.
Had a girl ordering a pina colada and then complaining about the coconut. She didn't like coconut. So I got her another drink and she goes, what are you going to do with that one? Will you throw it away? I just looked at her, told her that I do like coconut and took a sip.
Number 12.
Worked part-time at a thrift store. Got cursed out by a customer yelling, why don't you get a real job? Replied with why don't you go yell at a real store? In the most tired deadpan voice. This happened a few times.
Number 13.
Commenter. Woman complained about her cocktail, saying she couldn't taste the alcohol. Could we make it stronger? It was already a double, but we added a splash. She still couldn't taste it. Could we add more? She was obviously drunk when she arrived and angling to get more drunk as cheap as possible. Which is why I took her cocktail, apologized that it wasn't to her liking, and said I'd take it off her bill, effectively cutting her off for the night. Person B. A bartender I used to work with hated when customers did this. So he used to pour a little liquor down in the straw. Giving the illusion more liquor was poured into the drink.
Number 14.
Table of 10, Sunday brunch, fancy restaurant, I'm hungover. A crowd swarms in at the opening and my whole section is sat at once. I'm efficient and cool, I'm used to this. I get to the big table and preface that water is being brought as we speak, then begin taking everyone's drink order. As I'm taking orders around the table, one woman blurts out that she wants water and not to forget the water, interrupting her friends and family as they make their requests. I acknowledge her each time until after the fourth time, saying, "If you ask for water again, I'll make sure everyone here gets water but you." She sinks back in her chair looking dumbfounded, and I go put in the order, then head to the bar.
Number 15.
When I was 15-16 working at my family's restaurant, there was a Christmas party and they booked out the front room. This one old guy kept complaining every time I brought him food / took it away. When dessert came, he made some snide comment and I burst into tears. When I got back to the kitchen, my dad saw me crying and asked what's wrong. I said it's okay and not to worry. Next minute my dad storms out of the kitchen and asks the entire front room who made his daughter cry. Room goes silent and everyone points to him. Dad rips into him for making a child cry and tells him he's not welcome back. Old guy tries to defend himself, saying I wasn't doing my job. Dad said something along the line of him not doing a good job as a human, so go F yourself. I miss working with him, haha.
Number 16.
Served in Muskoka, Ontario years ago, lots of celebrities in the area for the summer, served Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn burgers, Martin Short, Dan Aykroyd, etc. Had a local nobody who thought he was a big shit celebrity. Would never tip and would always crumple up both copies of the Visa bill into a tiny little ball, even chew on it till it was the size of a spitball. So this asshat comes in with a bunch of friends and treats them all to supper, $600 bill, crumples up the Visa bills again into the tiny little ball and flicks it at me with a grin on his face. I swiftly kick it off the patio and into the lake our patio is on. He sees this and says in front of the table, "Guess you won't know what your tip is now." I tell the table flat out he never tips anyway, so no loss, and walk away. They leave. I call the police on a dime and dash because there is no evidence this guy paid. It's in the lake now, and I deleted the pre-auth from the debit machine. Cops go to this guy's house and make him return to the restaurant to pay. He wasn't an asshole ever again.
Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time. Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe, if you dare. He showed us a video of him lighting a cat on fire while it was alive. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Friends of sociopaths / psychopaths. What was your most uncomfortable moment with them? Number 1.
Commenter. I remember from a very early age that my mom would just stand in the entrance to my room with a knife. This didn't happen very often, maybe 2 to 3 times a year. When I was 9, I finally asked her why she would do this. I'll never forget how she said this. She looked me dead in the eyes and said that I was a mistake and she was deciding if she should do what she should have done a long time ago. I asked to move in with my grandma a week later. Thinking about how she said it still gets my heart racing 22 years later. I don't know if I can accurately describe it, but every single hair on my body stood straight up. I was paralyzed with fear and I felt like if I moved too suddenly she would strike. Backstory: Mom had me when she was 16 and regularly told me that I ruined her life. She was a habitual drug user and alcoholic. She told me that if she had the money she would have had an abortion. Person B: that sucks, dude. Just gonna say, 2 to 3 times a year is actually very often for something like that to be occurring.
Number 2.
Commenter. In high school, my boyfriend at the time and I shared a math class together. It was well known we were dating, so I would always take him his homework upon teacher's request if he missed class, which by the way, he skipped a lot. I broke up with him over Christmas break because he cheated on me. Math teacher obviously still assumed we were together, so he asked me to bring him his homework. I did. Got to his house, wanting to drop it off at his doorstep. He told me to come in and explain it to him. He locked his bedroom door and started saying shit like, "If I can't have you then no one else can, I could get you back in a second. Just admit it," etc. Then the true kicker: if I killed you or if you died, I would keep your body in my closet or hung behind my door just to have sex with it. I never had sex with him and I think that killed him. He then proceeded to try to make out with me and jam his hands down my pants. He actually thought it was endearing and had no idea why I was so upset. I got out, called my mom to pick me up, and ran back to the school. He lived close. Terrifying. To this day I'm still horrified about it. Last I heard he was trying to be a magician, looks like Charles Manson, and is in and out of psych wards.
Person B. There's an episode of Homicide Hunter almost exactly like this, except the boy kills the girl and hides her in the family's basement. And the family knew but didn't tell anyone. Glad you were able to get out of your situation.
Number 3.
Commenter. We were the police. We were cleaning our guns. This guy pointed the gun at me and asked me if I trusted him. Do you think the gun is unloaded? He asked me. I could be negligent or evil and I could leave a bullet in there. He pulls the trigger, laughs, and carries on cleaning the gun like nothing. He thought it was funny. He knew it was against all regulations. That's why it was so funny according to him. This guy no longer has his permit to carry a gun. This was 20 years ago. His gun privilege was revoked from him after an incident when he shot at a wall over a colleague's head. He shot wide over his head and was surprised by everyone's response to the incident. I wasn't trying to kill him or anything, that's why I shoot over his head. He said. Person B. A friend of mine was killed this exact same way by his roommate. Person C. My husband's cousin was accidentally shot and killed like this. The shooter was his maternal uncle, but her family swears up and down the gun went off by itself. The paternal side, my SOS family, points out that if it was an accident, why did the uncle leave the country? Also, he was slightly drunk, they'd just come back from deer hunting. Person D. Pointing a gun to your friend is one of the biggest crimes you can make in the Turkish army. I don't know if you don't have a rule like that, but it should be punished. Person E. I had a friend when I was a kid find a gun in the garage, he pointed it at me and pulled the trigger. There wasn't a bullet in it. He laughed. I remember feeling super lightheaded and sick to my stomach. I went and told my mom, who then beat the kid and told his mother, who then beat him also. Never played with him again.
Number 4.
Someone in our extended family. He offered to kill my cat for me to save a vet bill. The cat wasn't sick. Or old. He was just very enthusiastic about helping us out with that particular issue. He's not allowed to be alone with pets anymore. This wasn't the first incident, actually. At a family gathering he took the family dog for a walk. He returned with the dog soaking wet. It was December, and he claimed the dog had chased a squirrel into the river. People didn't entirely believe that story, somehow. He also tends to just leave gatherings without telling anyone, sleeps in the garden instead of on the couch, and he rarely blinks. He is just altogether a little odd.
Number 5.
Commenter. He had a gas-powered pellet gun, and we were 13 years old, and it was one of my first times being high. He had me against the wall and gave me 5 minutes to choose between him shooting me in the genitals or in the head. If I didn't choose, he said he was just gonna go nuts. I just kinda fidgeted in place saying, "You're gonna kill me." I was 13 and high, and at the end of the 5 minutes he told me he was effing with me. He also emptied a huge box of matches into the sink one time, and when we all told him not to, he called us pussies and lit it all on fire. He was a major pyro. I'm pretty sure he's in jail now. I'm 19 and he's 20. Person B. We'd hang out a lit in middle school and every day I'd be worried I'd say something wrong and be punished with some unique torture. Like the pellet gun thing and stuff related to my anxiety, like making me sing in front of his friends. I'm not a singer by any means, he just made me. We'd always play weird performance related games like have dance-offs or sing-offs, and whoever didn't want to participate, usually me, would always be punished in some way.
Number 6.
Commenter. I've been friends with a sociopath. He is honestly like my brother. We have developed this relationship that basically treats me like his moral compass, but it doesn't always work. He is still manipulative and cruel at times, and he does only truly care about himself, but he tries to be a good person because he doesn't want to be an asshole. This being said, my most uncomfortable moment with him would have to be when he was telling me about watching some guy almost die. He was telling me how he knew he should have stopped watching and helped him, but he was too interested in what the outcome would be if he didn't help. It was creepy to know that as hard as he may try to be a decent person, sometimes he still can't help himself. Person B. Similar case with my ex. She had a lot of moments where she felt bad about the way she was and wished she was normal. She'd often do things that were right because she felt they made her better, but never actually sacrificed much to be good.
Number 7.
Had a boyfriend, now ex for sure, straight kidnapped me once when I was 18. I left in the middle of a fight to walk to work and he jumped in his car, pulled up next to me, grabbed me by the throat and threw me in the car. He drove like a maniac, swerving into traffic and super close to parked cars, telling me he was going to kill us both. He made me call my work and tell them I wasn't coming in.
I was sobbing hysterically and I just played it off like I just found out a close friend had died. I don't remember how I talked myself out of that situation, but looking back I can't believe how weak I was and just did what he said, even knowing he was probably going to kill me. He got arrested for manhandling me and biting me on the cheek outside of my job. Super embarrassing. I'm so glad I snapped out of that shit. I would put a knife in someone before I ever let them treat me that way again. The weakness came from me staying with him afterwards. He would cry in my lap and beg me to help him be a better man, and there were always promises of never doing it again, which of course were lies. When he did get arrested and the police were taking pictures of my beat up face and everyone was staring at me in the parking lot, I should have loved myself enough to get out. When the officer taking pictures and collecting evidence, a man my grandfather's age, looked me in the eyes and told me I didn't deserve it and needed to get out, I should have never looked back. I'm ashamed to say I put up with a lot more bullshit before I finally walked away. I hate to say it, but I think it is a weakness. I also think people can find a strength in themselves they never imagined possible if they find a reason to see it in themselves. It doesn't define you in the long run unless you let it.
Number 8.
Commenter, married 1. Last straw was the day I caught his reflection as I passed by. Pure evil and hatred in his eyes. I told him I was leaving the following week. He said, "If I ever see you somewhere with someone else, I won't say a word to you." I said okay. He then added, "I'll just walk up to you and shoot you in your pretty face." I was moving some things out and looked under the bed for a pair of shoes. Found his guns, fully loaded and out of their cases under his side of the bed. I went to the cops. Nothing came of it. Fast forward and he remarries before the ink is dry on the divorce. New wife shoots him in the head and kills him in his sleep. Proceeds to kill herself by ODing on his pain pills. Yeah. I sleep better these days. Person B, geez, I wonder what he was putting her through now. That's messed up. Glad you got out ASAP.
Number 9.
Commenter, this kid in my 8th grade class. He showed us a video of him lighting a cat on fire while it was alive. He thought it was funny. We reported the video to the school and he was apprehended the next day. I believe you can find a news story online about it. It happened in Maryland a few years ago.
Number 10.
Commenter,
My sister is a sociopath. It took me a lot of years to realize this and stop rationalizing it. I'm a diabetic and have been in comas. During the last one in 2015, after a year of no contact, she showed up at the hospital saying I had expressed to her that my wishes were do not resuscitate. About 12 of my friends shouted her down and I woke up 3 days later on my own. If I had coded during that time, however, there would have been a lot of gray area around if they were allowed to revive me. About 4 months later she took out a life insurance policy on me and asked me to sign it. I said no lol. I no longer speak to her. Oh man, this blew up. I should add that I now have very clear wishes notarized and copies kept with my doctors and trusted friends. She's not taking me out that easily. Thank you guys for being concerned. It's great advice for everyone in a medical situation to have just in case. Person B, that is insane. You better write some kind of will/document that says she is never the beneficiary of anything in your name. I'm worried she's going to forge something. So chilling. I hope all is well with you. Number 11.
I dated one once, didn't realize it until much later when the abuse was so thick I couldn't breathe. The one situation that sticks out the most was one night, completely unsolicited, he looked at me solemnly and said if you ever left me I would find you and kill you. 11 years of shit like that. Suffice to say I'm glad I've got an entire country between myself and him now.
Number 12.
I dated one for 8 months. He told me when I cried, he didn't feel anything. He even laughed one time when I cried. The abuse started to get physical, so I broke up with him over text. I made sure all the doors and windows were locked, and the blinds and curtains were closed. I turned off all the lights in the house so he couldn't see me if he decided to come over. I had to go outside to have a cigarette, and I literally brought a knife with me. I called a friend. I was that afraid of him.
Number 13.
I dated someone who I now believe is a sociopath. The most uncomfortable thing while we were dating was that he would constantly whisper things in my ear in public, in earshot of other people like, "Do you think I look hot right now? Or do you think I'm cool?" And the first few times I thought he was joking, so I laughed, and he'd get angry. He wanted a serious answer. He wanted me to tell him how much I wanted to jump his bones right there in front of all of our friends, while they were watching and listening. I'd get lectured afterwards like, "You know, you really insulted me personally when you laughed at me in front of everyone." He could also cry on cue to get what he wanted, and as soon as he got what he wanted, It would instantly switch off and he'd turn very serious and tell me what a horrible person I was. The instant emotional switches are disarming. When he broke up with me, I went from being his favorite person in the world to instantly at the very bottom of his shit list. He laughed when I cried on multiple occasions, calling me ridiculous. What's very alarming about people like him is how many people they can get on their side with their charm. None of his current friends know anything about his behavior behind closed doors. And they're all new people. All the people who caught on when we were dating are gone from his life. He has convinced his new friends that I'm a psychopath because I tried to tell others what happened, so whenever I say anything about what a creep he is, I get brigaded by the new people who are now being manipulated. Also, he is completely dead in the face and eyes until you interact with him, and then it's like he becomes animated.
Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.